The last I checked, one of the ideological strengths of our Republican Party has been, as Senator Mike Lee told us this morning, is to be a check on the centralization of power by a few. Eisenhower's farewell address warned us about the military-industrial complex. And it's been heartening to see people like Senator Vance, Senator Hawley, and many other of our new wave of Republicans start to stand up and recognize the danger of centralization of power within that military-industrial complex. I think the pandemic also served as a key moment for conservatives as we saw people like Dr. Fauci and other health officials try to step into local communities and make decisions and usurp that decision-making authority. Time and time again, when faced with this, Republicans, especially on the state level, pushed back and rightly kept that power. At the national level, conservatives, we've been celebrating the recent Chevron decision. I know it'll have impacts in Utah and across the rest of the country as well. But once again, we celebrate it because of that same theme, our skepticism of centralization of power, decision-making authority. However, I found it odd that as Republicans, when Amazon or Meta comes to us and says, hey, we'd like to offshore our manufacturing base, get a race to a bottom with wages and health insurance, we'd like to censor conservative speech on platforms and eliminate all of our collective bargaining rights, we say, well, how can we help you? For many years now, I really believe that our party has been blinded to what Sohrab Ahmari calls private tyranny, or tyranny incorporated. Corporate interest groups wrap themselves in ideas that are really important to conservative Americans, things like reducing government waste or cutting taxes. But at the heart of it, corporations have one key goal, and that is maximizing their profits. Don't misunderstand my remarks today to think that I don't think corporations should make money or that American businesses shouldn't succeed. But as elected officials, as Riley Moore told us, we have more to our tapestry, more accountability to the people of America rather than companies that try and run this country. When we respond to constituent concerns about surprise medical bills or look at reforming non-compete agreements, these corporations are extremely effective at rallying the troops, funding well-opposed efforts to make sure that we hear taglines like, well, that's not the role of government. Or we hear taglines like, this is the heavy hand of government interfering with just our neutral company, just trying to make money and go home to our families. We need to remember that couldn't be farther from the truth. These are the same companies that in 2020 suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story. These are the same companies that actively colluded with the presidential campaign to censor political speech on their platforms. Take the pharmaceutical companies, for example, that pumped $60 million into this last election cycle to influence the outcome of our elections. That doesn't sound like a neutral arbiter to me. Most pertinent to this panel, I truly believe that our party can take back working class voters by rejecting the corporate status quo and focusing on real issues that impact real families in our districts, in our communities, and in our states. Take a look at the opioid crisis for one. This is a crisis that's ravaged working class America, places like Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, all the way to Provo, Utah, where I hail from. This crisis has largely been fueled by unmitigated corporate greed from companies like Purdue Pharma and other massive corporations that could care less about the wake of destruction that they leave on their path to their bottom line. The statistics and the graphs and the charts on addictions are astounding. In 2021 alone, we lost more Americans to opioid overdose than the entire Vietnam War combined. How certain politicians can see fentanyl flowing across our southern border and in our communities, wiping out our working class communities and keep their head in the sand is beyond me. But these graphs and charts and statistics about addiction, they can tell us a piece, but we'll never get the whole story until we do what Batya did and go into our communities and learn those stories. The graphs that we see will never fully articulate the pain of a 4-year-old son who grows up never getting to play catch with his father because we as Republicans took our hand off the wheel during this bankrolling of these companies. The charts will never convey how a mother feels when she's setting the dinner table and sees an empty chair at the dinner table where her beautiful daughter once sat. I can tell you as a police officer, it's so obvious to me that the statistics in the chart, it will never quantify the damage that's done to a community when you're sitting there outside of an apartment complex with a 10-year-old girl, while my partner and the EMS inside are trying to revive her mom, doing CPR on her because she just smoked fentanyl in their apartment. And the 10-year-old girl says, yeah, mom's having a hard day. What graph can we ever hope would reflect the challenges that faces? Conservatives have an opportunity to promote an agenda that brings hope to this part of America that's been left behind. We know what the Democrats' solution to this problem is. You can look at San Francisco or Los Angeles, look at Skid Row or the Tenderloin District, where legalizing crime and open-air drug use is considered compassionate. Look at this presidential administration that, in a sick, twisted turn of events, has decided that in New York City they're going to fund crack pipes and tinfoil as their solution to the opioid crisis. So let me ask you this. As all of us here, as part of the conservative movement, whether we find ourselves at the doorstep running a campaign, whether it's for city council or the legislature, or you're supporting a group or a candidate, and the person whose door you knock on comes to the door, and it's one of those mothers that we spoke about who lost her son to opioid overdose. And then there comes that 4-year-old son or daughter that comes up because now she had to move in with her to take care of him because dad's no longer with us. And she tells you a little bit about her story and says, so what are you going to do? What's your solution? Tell me about your plan. Are we going to say, well, that's not the role of government? Or so Barry Goldwater tells me. Or are we going to bring hope to this America that's been left behind? I'll tell you, by at least talking about these issues, we can start to reach those Americans who have felt abandoned and forgotten for years and years and years by Republican leaders. When the hope offered to thousands of miners facing impending layoffs is a smug tweet telling them to learn to code, we have a problem. When we have politicians labeling half the country deplorable because they wanted to vote for someone else, we have a problem. When factory worker jobs across America and Rust Belt communities are sacrificed at the altar of free trade so we can have a t-shirt from Walmart that'd be $2 cheaper, we have a problem. Groups like the Bull Moose Project and the American Principles Project have helped conservatives shape this message. American Compass is another one. I'm one of those nerds that actually reads it and then sends it to our attorneys and says, what can we do here in Utah with this? But these groups have helped conservatives open their eyes to these problems, especially the ones posed by big tech. Earlier this year in the Utah legislature, I sat in the House Judiciary Committee when we heard from the parents of Dexton Obrey, a 14-year-old kid who by any stretch was a normal, happy, and healthy American who unfortunately fell into the thralls of social media addiction. Dexton's mom shared their story with our committee. She testified, and I want to read this. She said, they knew what algorithms and content they were showing Dexton, my son. They knew what my son was addicted to, and they brought him down lower and lower and lower until eventually his algorithm started to show him TikToks, literally showing him how to commit suicide. Sadly, a few months later, he did. As a Republican Party, we have to ask ourselves, if we cannot stand up and be a bulwark to our families in this country against that kind of horrific corporate greed, what do we stand for? President Roosevelt warned us of a time like this. 100 years ago, he said, those who advocate a total lack of regulation, those who advocate lawlessness in the business world, they themselves give strongest impulse to what I believe would be the deadening movement toward unadulterated state socialism. So the question is, where do we go from here? Just a few weeks ago, a great American and the president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, answered that for us. And he gave us a mission. He said, conservatives can no longer be the party of no. We have to show Americans what we stand for. I'll tell you just a few things that we've done in Utah. We have cracked down on big tech companies. We have placed strict guardrails on the kinds of data that these companies can collect from our youth. We have placed age verification requirements on pornography companies. Most importantly, we've created a private right of action for minors whose mental health has been harmed by these social media algorithms. This year, I sponsored legislation to get at the heart of the fentanyl and meth crisis, to eliminate homeless encampments and open-air drug scenes, and help push people into drug treatment and expand mental health care. Apprenticeships. We've looked at the strengthened youth apprenticeships, helping kids understand that working with your hands is not a bad word. And when my mom pointed at the garbage man growing up and said, hey, if you don't do good in school, you're going to be just like the garbage man. Well, I'm a cop, and I'll tell you, the garbage man actually makes more than me. So I'll tell you, our private sector labor unions are an incredible asset in this fight to say, what are we for? Today in Utah, apprenticeships give the opportunity to students to earn while they learn, accruing no student debt and graduating with a starting annual income of about $72,000 with strong health insurance and benefits. Those are the kind of opportunities that can change the trajectory of working class families for generations to come. Now, all of these accomplishments in Utah don't exactly square with every corporate, bankrolled think tank's top policies and such, but I can tell you they have a real impact on real families. It's not a secret what the working class want. And I'll tell you, there's no better example than Riley Moore explaining. He didn't tell you, well, when I Googled this. No, he went to the union hall. He shook hands. He listened. He responded to correspondence. Batya's incredible book, which I encourage you all to read, she didn't just theorize about it in a beanbag chair in the New York Times press room. She got in a car and planes and trains and automobiles and listened. Whatever your mission is in the conservative movement, if you're an elected official, if you're an activist, if you are working at a group, that would be my ask of you. Next time you go to the gas station, talk to your clerk. What's going on in your life? How is everything? And actually listen. When you're getting your haircut, talk to the barber about his family. Talk about the schools that his kids are going to. When we start to listen more than we speak, the answers will come. We know what we need to do. We just need to have the courage to do it. Thank you so much.